Kimberly, my wife of a decade, greeted me warmly as I walked through the door after a long Wednesday at work. Her usual cheerful demeanor was absent, replaced by a serious expression that instantly put me on edge. She asked me to sit at the table because we needed to discuss something important. My heart sank. I knew this was the beginning of one of those difficult conversations every couple dreads. As I took my seat, she began carefully, her voice tinged with anxiety. "You know I love you and would never do anything to harm our marriage," she said. Her words were meant to reassure me, but they had the opposite effect. A sense of unease settled in my stomach. I nodded, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. Kimberly took a deep breath and continued, "I love you and want us to grow old together. But I've made a decision. I want to have an affair." Her words hit me like a freight train, leaving me stunned and speechless. I tried to process what she had just said, but it didn't make any sense. "Let's get this straight," I said, my voice shaky with disbelief. "You love me, you don't want to harm our relationship, but you want to be with someone else." She looked at me earnestly. "I wouldn't put it quite like that. I've met someone I'd like to have a physical relationship with. It would only happen occasionally, and I promise to always be open and honest with you. I love you enough to believe this won't affect my feelings for you. If you truly love me, you should let me do this because I feel compelled to." She smiled, as if this declaration were perfectly reasonable. I was bewildered and hurt. "I don't understand why you think you have to do this, and I can't see how it wouldn't affect us. Have you made plans with this person yet?" Kimberly nodded. "We're tentatively planning to go away for a weekend next week." Her eyes searched mine and she asked, "How would you react if I proposed the same thing to you?" The truth would have infuriated her, so I chose my words carefully. "I would be fine with it as long as you assured me it wouldn't harm our relationship." She looked at me, her eyes filled with frustration. "You know damn well you would have flipped out if I had brought up such a thing." I scoffed, feeling the sting of her words. "I honestly didn't expect you to react like this. I thought your love for me would allow me to do something so important to me." "Well, whatever you've been smoking, it must be illegal," I snapped. "Did you really think I just gave you permission to be with this guy? So I'm supposed to sit at home and do nothing while you go out for the weekend?" Kimberly looked taken aback. "Maybe I didn't think things through properly. You're right. I didn't consider many factors, including my own feelings. If I say no, will you still go ahead with it?" "I honestly don't know," she admitted, her voice wavering. "I never expected you to refuse me. We didn't think this through very well. This is what we'll do. Give me a few days to think about this. Let's sit down Sunday afternoon and talk about it after I've had some time to reflect." Tonight took me by surprise. Feeling uneasy, I left the room and started relocating my belongings to the guest room. Kimberly followed me, asking what I was doing. "I prefer not to share a bed with someone who seems more interested in someone else than me," I explained. I closed the door firmly after entering the guest room, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and confusion. The night was restless. I barely slept, my mind churning with plans and possibilities. By morning, I had a strategy in place. I left for work as usual but didn't speak to Kimberly. Instead, I called my office and explained that I needed the next 2 days for personal reasons. I bought 3 voice-activated recorders and placed one near the phone, one in our bedroom, and one in her car. I found a phone tape recorder that connected to our landlines. At the cell phone provider, I obtained a copy of her phone charges, since my name was on her phone plan. While Kimberly was still at work, I accessed her email accounts. I discovered one I hadn't known about. The password was simple. What I found was revealing, but at least she hadn't been physically involved with him yet. I set up the account to forward any emails to me without leaving any trace. I'd also got my hands on discreet GPS locators, which I intended to slip into her wallet and her car. It had been a hectic day, but I had everything set up to keep track of her. The only thing missing was access to her cell phone to check for messages. I hoped to do that later that evening, along with planting the GPS devices. My heart ached with the weight of the deception. and the impending confrontation. Yet, I couldn't help but feel a grim determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I checked Kimberly's emails and discovered she had been exchanging messages with a coworker named Donald Douglas. Each message felt like a stab to my heart, confirming their plans for the upcoming weekend, no matter my objections. Determined to turn Donald's world upside down as he had mine, I decided to act. That Friday, I visited a highly recommended divorce lawyer. I explained my situation, stating adultery as the cause and naming Donald Douglas as the other man. The lawyer assured me the case would be straightforward with the proper evidence. I handed over the emails and phone records, mentioning that I would soon have audio tapes as well. His confident nod gave me a grim sense of satisfaction as he began the proceedings immediately. When Kimberly returned home that evening, I ignored her. She went about preparing dinner, but I couldn't bear to be near her. I left the house and went to a bar, drowning my sorrow in a few beers. Upon my return, she tried to talk to me, but I brushed past her, entering the guest room and slamming the door shut. Her only chance to save our marriage was to cancel her plans with Donald, but I doubted she would. I avoided her all weekend until Sunday afternoon, when I finally decided it was time to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, and I expressed my deep dissatisfaction with her request. I explained that I had thought it over thoroughly and couldn't come to terms with it. Despite her claims that it wouldn't affect our marriage, it already had. Her upset demeanor was a stark contrast to her earlier confidence. I suggested that if she had considered my perspective, she might have been more understanding. I had tried to see things from her point of view, but I couldn't find any positive outcome. "I have to decline your request," I said firmly. "How can you be so selfish when you love me?" she countered, frustration evident in her voice. "If anyone here is selfish, it's you, wanting to be with someone else," I replied. "What happens if I go ahead with it anyway?" she challenged. "There will be serious consequences for any extramarital relations," I warned. 10 years ago, we both made vows to be faithful. "I understand, but this is something I need to do," she insisted. "Well, I suppose this discussion is over. You really should think about this," I said, getting up and leaving the house. I took my laptop to a nearby Wi-Fi hotspot to monitor their emails. Kimberly was furious, but she assured Donald she would leave regardless. He was delighted, informing her that he had already reserved room 313 at the Hilton in Oklahoma City for Friday and Saturday nights. They also had a romantic date planned for Saturday evening. Kimberly mentioned buying new underwear specifically for their date. I immediately reserved the room for Thursday night. They were making it too easy. Their check-in time was 4 p.m., so Donald planned to pick her up at 2 p.m. for the 2-hour drive. I was surprised he was going to pick her up at home. I needed to decide how to handle that. I also reserved a room close to theirs to intercept all their signals over the next few days. I gathered all the necessary equipment, including small fiber optic HD video cameras, intending to install them in their room on Thursday to document their weekend. Ignoring her completely, I waited for Wednesday, her day of reckoning. That evening, I decided to give her one final chance. I invited her to join me at the table. She complied, albeit reluctantly. "Have you given it much thought?" I asked. "I have," she confirmed, expressing her intention to go through with her plan. She mentioned the upcoming trip with Donald, hoping we could get past this. I sighed deeply. "This is your final chance to reconsider. Don't jeopardize our marriage for someone else." Her eyes hardened. "I need to do this." "Then you've chosen Donald over me," I said, standing up. I left the room, closing the door firmly, signaling the end of our marriage. It was clear now that she had made her choice, and someone would have to face the consequences. The first morning, I went to work with a heavy heart, asking for the afternoon and the following day off to finalize my divorce plans with Kimberly. My boss, sensing the gravity of my situation, offered his support and granted me the time I needed. On Thursday, I drove to Oklahoma City, checked into their hotel room, and meticulously set up the surveillance devices. Each camera had to be perfectly positioned and tested to ensure they captured every detail. Once everything was operational, I felt a grim satisfaction. I wanted undeniable evidence for the divorce proceedings. I walked down the hall past their room to verify the range for monitoring, ensuring I could capture their conversations and actions. Satisfied with the setup, I returned home, my mind consumed with the impending end of my marriage. There was one more errand to complete. I went to a gun store and purchased a small can of pepper spray to disrupt their romantic date. When I arrived home, Kimberly was waiting in the kitchen, her eyes filled with unspoken questions. I walked past her without a word, slamming the door to the guest room behind me. Moments later, she came in, attempting to be friendly. I cut her off coldly, save it for Donald. I don't need your sympathy. She looked hurt, but left quietly. I slept restlessly that night, my mind replaying the betrayal over and over. Friday morning arrived, and I left the house without saying anything to her. At the lawyer's office, I signed the divorce papers. I informed them I would have all the required evidence by Monday and asked for Kimberly to be served at her workplace on Monday afternoon. I also requested that Donald be served at the same time with papers for an alienation of affection lawsuit. Kimberly's GPS indicated she was at the hair salon. I took the opportunity to enter the house and open her suitcase, discovering the new underwear she had bought for her rendezvous. They were undeniably attractive, but it pained me that they weren't for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I sprayed pepper spray on the crotch of her panties and the cuffs of her bra, then carefully placed them back in the suitcase. It was a petty act, but I felt a twisted sense of justice. Next, I went to the bank and closed our joint accounts, transferring all the funds to a new account in my name. I also cancelled all our shared credit cards. By noon, I had completed my morning's work and headed home to say goodbye to my wife. I knew she was preparing for her new man. When I arrived, Kimberly was nowhere to be seen, so I assumed she was upstairs getting ready. I went up to her room and found her in the lingerie I had previously gifted her. She tried to cover herself, but I told her not to be silly. I had seen it all before. She looked stunning with her new hairstyle, fullest makeup, and alluring lingerie. The sight of her made my heart ache. "You look beautiful today," I said softly, unable to hide my sadness. "It's a shame you never made this effort for me." She looked at me, a mix of guilt and defiance in her eyes. "I just wanted to feel good about myself today." "You look alluring, but it feels like you're more concerned with impressing someone else than you ever were with me," I replied, my voice tinged with bitterness. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I just wanted to feel attractive." I sighed deeply, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "You've always been attractive to me, Kimberly. I love you deeply, and I believe you love me too." I approached her and gently removed the rings from her left hand. "These rings symbolize our vows to forsake all others," I explained. "It appears they mean less to you now." She looked surprised but didn't protest. I slipped the rings into my pocket. "I don't want to see the ring I gave you on your finger while you're with another man. The engagement ring was my mother's, and I plan to keep it for sentimental reasons." I looked at her, my eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and resolve. "I won't be here when he arrives, but I don't want him in my house. If you let him in, I will take serious action against him and ensure you will never be desirable to a man again. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I would let him in." "Good," I replied, turning to leave. "I'll be keeping an eye on things." "Why are you behaving like this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because the love of my life has shattered that love," I said, my voice breaking. "I hope this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Kimberly." I turned and walked away from my soon-to-be ex-wife. Kimberly's voice rose in a desperate shout as I left, but I was finished with her. I parked down the street, positioning myself so I could see the house clearly. I was willing to risk everything to ensure I caught them in the act. Soon, his car arrived. He walked to the door and rang the bell. Kimberly opened it, her suitcase in hand. She stepped out, set it down, and embraced him, their kiss long and passionate. She glanced over at me, a smug grin plastered on her face. They got into the car, and as they drove past, she gave me another look of triumph. I responded by flipping her off, wiping that grin off her face. Back home, I changed all the locks and the garage door code. My suitcase was already packed, so I grabbed it and drove to Casey. After checking in, I went to my room to set up my laptop. Kimberly and Donald had already started their tryst, and the camera focused on the foot of the bed showed everything. Donald emerged from the bathroom, completely naked, and I couldn't help but laugh. He was holding a very small tool, and Kimberly was used to far more than what this guy could provide. Donald joined Kimberly on the bed, clearly ready for another round. She smiled and extended her arms, but I laughed again as she reached for his tiny tool. He didn't have to hold back. I doubted she could feel anything. Wow, had she made a terrible decision? This guy was completely pitiful. I saw frustration on her face as he took a break, and it was clear she wasn't going to be pleased with the outcome of the weekend. She would return home frustrated and be kicked out the next day. Donald was soon ready for another round, giving her another underwhelming 4-minute session. He'd already finished 3 times, and she wasn't even close. This was turning out better than I had hoped. I decided to leave everything recording, while I went out for dinner and drinks. When I returned, he was fast asleep, and she seemed even more frustrated. This was actually quite enjoyable, once I got over the grief of losing my wife. I went to bed thinking about how much fun I'd have messing with him tomorrow. I thought about some of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar, and realized I'd soon be free to pursue them. I fell asleep with a contented smile on my face. There was no more pain for me. My path was set, and I knew where I was going. I awoke feeling refreshed and ready to have some fun. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and grabbed some snacks in case I couldn't leave the room. Once back, I called a local florist and ordered a bouquet for Kimberly, similar to the ones I used to give her on our anniversary. I wanted her to think about what she was throwing away because there would be no more anniversaries. I requested that it be delivered at 10 a.m. The timing proved to be perfect. They left the room for a while, then resumed their activities. They were soon naked, and just as they began, there was a knock on the door. The florist delivered the flowers, and Kimberly's face shifted from contemplation to anger. She picked up her cell phone and dialed a number. My phone rang, and I answered. "Hello, how are you?" I said, feigning ignorance. "Not great. My wife is out with another guy while I'm here. I'm getting angrier by the minute. Why do you care?" "I received a bouquet of flowers, just like the ones you always give me on our anniversary. I was curious what you were up to." "I'm not sure how you could think I did that. First and foremost, you and your brilliant boyfriend kept me in the dark about your plans. Second, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been rugweed, and the card would have addressed my cheating cut wife. Not very nice, is it? But then again, neither is your brief encounter with Donald. Perhaps the flowers will give you an idea of what you're throwing away." She was stunned into silence. I ended the call, ignoring her subsequent attempts to reach me. She turned to Donald, relaying my words, and he assured her that I'd get over it. However, that wouldn't happen until I got rid of her. She wasn't in the mood for intimacy at first, but eventually she gave in, though the passion was noticeably absent. As I watched their strained interactions, I felt a sense of closure. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I had survived the worst and was ready to move on, leaving behind the betrayal and heartache. I decided to order pizza delivery, specifically Kimberly's favorite, cheese pizza. The timing was perfect. As Donald was getting back into the game, the pizza arrived. He was clearly annoyed and refused to pay, but the delivery person insisted, confirming the room number and his cell phone number. Donald even threatened to call the police, but eventually he grudgingly paid up. Having paid for it, they decided to eat. After finishing their meal, they talked for a while, but Donald's hormones got the best of him, and he pursued her again. Just as things were heating up, I called a sandwich shop and requested her favorite sandwich for delivery. About a minute into their intimate time, the sandwich arrived. When Kimberly saw the sandwich, she assumed I had discovered their location. Donald couldn't believe it, but she spilled the beans about my icy remark earlier, claiming I had most likely hacked into her new email. It took her some time, but she finally realized what was going on. She said I was quite clever and wouldn't have had much trouble doing so. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while, intending to return, freshen up, and prepare for their romantic date. She later assured him that she would make it up to him tonight before they left. I couldn't stop laughing. I was in tears. When they returned, they showered and dressed, with Kimberly putting on some lingerie and giving Donald a little show. He attempted to make a move, but she insisted on going out for their date. I wondered how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed and looked stunning. I hoped my plan would work, because it would make for an interesting spectacle. They left, and I settled in, looking forward to their return. About an hour later, they came back, and Kimberly dashed into the bathroom to take a shower. She stayed in there for a while, and when she came out, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They appeared to be in pain, and it seemed little Donald wasn't getting any action that night. Kimberly groaned on the bed as Donald tried to climb on top of her. She went off on him, saying she was in pain and wasn't interested right now. She chalked it up to an allergic reaction to her new lingerie, not knowing I had pepper sprayed them. I spent some time organizing my videos and creating DVDs for both my lawyer and Donald's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been an extremely successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the source of it. Sunday morning, I got up and went home. Kimberly was in for a lot of trouble when she returned, but tomorrow, everything would be over. Later that day, Donald dropped her off without even walking her to the door. He just let her leave. I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a football game, and didn't notice her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely responded. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile, and said she thought I'd be glad to see her, given that she was not dead. I responded by asking what had given her that impression, and whether she thought I had suddenly become foolish. She responded, stating that she did not think I was foolish, but rather that my love for her was strong enough to overcome the circumstances. I retorted that while I had once loved her wholeheartedly, I had changed after she left with someone else. Despite my pleas, I expressed that I had poured my heart out to her only to have it mean nothing. I admitted that once she left with him, I no longer cared whether she would return. She appeared taken aback by my feelings and stated that she couldn't believe I felt that way about her. I responded firmly, confirming that this was the case and emphasizing that she had made a significant error. She then asked if there was any chance we could move forward, promising to do anything to make things right. I responded with a sarcastic remark, suggesting she get down on her knees and apologize. She protested, saying she couldn't do it. I sided with her and admitted that I knew she wouldn't, which only strengthened my doubts about the value of her promises to save our marriage, much like her pledge of fidelity. When we got married, Kimberly used to tell me she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that evening. But now, my response was cold and distant. You need me? I don't think so. Making love tonight? Not likely. Did you have little Donald use protection whenever you were with him? She looked taken aback. No, he's married, but I can't have children. I continued, my voice hard. Do you think you're the only one he's been with? Are you damaged goods now? As far as I'm concerned, I won't touch you until you have a clean bill of health from a doctor. Also, I don't do seconds. She snapped back angrily, right. I'm going to use protection to sleep with my wife after she spent the weekend with some loser. Screw you. You chose little Donald over me. I'm going out for a while. I can't bear looking at your cheating face tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong. I responded firmly, we can discuss this tomorrow when you return from work. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and went to a nearby bar and grill to eat dinner and clear my mind. Well, my mind was already clear because I knew exactly what I was doing. I simply needed some distance from her. I don't drink much, So I had a meal and went for a long walk. When I got home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to leave my bed. She argued, claiming, "This is our bed. I have the same right to be here as you do." I replied, "The hell you do. You gave up on that when you became involved with little Donald. So get out of my bed, or I'll take your belongings and throw you out on the street." She began crying and slowly exited the room, and I made sure to close and lock the door behind her. Her tears were still audible as she walked down the corridor. The following morning, I completely ignored her. We both had breakfast, and she left at her usual time. As she turned to go, she said she loved me. I gave her a cold, scornful look and replied, "I loved you too," emphasizing the past tense. I saw tears well up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, I started packing her belongings into garbage bags. Then I contacted Donald's wife. I asked if she was aware that her husband had spent the weekend with my wife. Catherine assumed he'd been away on business. So when I offered to provide her with copies of my evidence, she was very interested. I was surprised when she opened the door. Catherine looked absolutely stunning. I stammered and had to apologize to her, blaming my initial shock on her beauty, which was completely accurate. We got down to business, and I explained what happened over the weekend. Catherine was furious, so we agreed that she would accompany me to the lawyer's office to see if he would take her case. The attorney agreed to represent her and even offered us a discount. Catherine began completing the necessary paperwork while I spoke with the attorney. I asked him if I needed to wait to serve Donald to protect Catherine, and he assured me that as long as she signed the papers first, she would be fine. Catherine and I went out to lunch while they prepared her divorce papers. After she signed them, I dropped her off at home and returned to await my Kimberly's call. I was supposed to call her that night to tell her how things went. My phone rang around 2 o'clock, and she sounded quite upset. "What the hell is this?" I was just served with divorce papers, and Donald received some papers about being sued for something. I responded, "Well, everything seems pretty straightforward to me. I warned you that there would be consequences to your weekend. You don't seem to have taken me seriously." "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this," she responded. "Maybe you should have listened to me instead of believing everything little Donald told you. Let's not discuss this over the phone. We can talk when you return to my place." Then I hung up. I put her belongings in garbage bags and tossed them into the front yard, knowing that I was filming the confrontation. It could be useful for obtaining a restraining order against her if necessary. When she pulled into the driveway and saw her belongings strewn about, she became enraged. She was screaming incoherently, and spit was flying from her mouth as she vented her rage. I remained calm as she vented, eventually breaking in to start our final conversation. "If you want to talk, you should sit down so we can have a civil conversation. If not, I'll load your belongings into your car and you can leave," I said firmly. She sobbed, her voice breaking. "I never imagined you'd do this to me." "Do this to you?" I retorted, incredulous. "You foolish woman. You did this to us. I warned you several times not to do it, and even begged you not to destroy our marriage. But you chose to do exactly that. So, why would you believe I wouldn't file for divorce? You said you loved me," she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. "I did," I admitted, my tone softening slightly. "I loved you more than anything, but you broke my heart in return. The problem was that you did not love or respect me. I can't live with someone who thinks so little of me, even though I still care about you." She looked puzzled, her eyes narrowing. "Why are you calling him Little Donald?" "I had video cameras set up in your room to capture everything that happened over the weekend," I explained, unable to hide my bitterness. "You can understand why I call him Little. The first time I saw his underwhelming package, I couldn't help but cry with laughter. I even wondered if you could feel anything from that. I also noticed that you weren't having as much fun as you usually did when we were close." Her face flushed with a mix of shame and anger. "We truly made love, and I will probably miss it." I shook my head, offering a different perspective. "Consider it this way. You now have the freedom to be with whomever you choose. You can have a different partner every night. She shook her head vehemently. I don't want that. I want you, only you. Let's go inside and sit down for a few minutes, I suggested, trying to calm the storm of emotions within both of us. I apologize for my harsh words. I'm dealing with a lot of anger, but please understand that I would never physically harm someone. The same cannot be said of little Donald. We went inside and sat down at the kitchen table, a familiar setting that now felt like a scene from a distant past. The realization that this would be our last time sitting together like this hit me hard. You wouldn't really hurt Donald, would you? She asked, her voice filled with doubt and fear. Why not? I replied firmly. He destroyed our marriage. Do you really believe that, or is it a ruse to make me appear bad so he can be with you? She asked, her voice trembling. I spoke with his wife this morning and shared my evidence with her. He told her he was away on business. They now share a lawyer, and we even received a discount. I told her, my voice steady. She reflected for a moment, then said, I wish you had been honest. I asked how he'd react if I wanted to be with another man. You'd have gone crazy. He knew his wife would never agree to it, I argued. I doubt you believe me even now, and that is one of the reasons we're getting divorced. But truthfully, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll discover that he has also been shown the door. So you're actually kicking me out? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I am, I confirmed. The night you revealed your plan, I went into the guest room to reflect. Within an hour, I knew I wanted to get divorced. On Thursday, I purchased the equipment required to collect evidence and hack into your email account. Then, on Friday, I went to the lawyer and started the divorce process. The finality of my words hum in the air, heavy with the weight of our broken promises and shattered dreams. She sat there, tears falling silently, as the reality of our situation settled in. The life we had built together was over, and there was no going back. She asked, her voice trembling, Why didn't you tell me about your plans to divorce me? I might have reconsidered. Is there any chance you'd forgive me? I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. Kimberly, I love you so much that forgiveness might have been possible. However, you squandered your final opportunity last night. I think I could forgive you, but I'd never trust you again. I would spend every day wondering when you would want to be with someone else. And I can't live like this. It's best if we end it now. Her tears flowed freely, each one a tiny drop of our shattered past. Unlike you, I continued, I thought about this thoroughly, but every time I came to the same conclusion. I'm going to divorce you and make Donald pay for destroying my marriage. You can call him before you leave if you want to share a place or something. Just don't try to use your credit card. I have cancelled them all. I left half of our checking account balance for you, but I removed my name from it. I will split our savings with you. You can keep your card, but you'll have to handle the payments. You can take all your clothes and personal items once you find a place to live. You can have as much furniture as you want, but the house is mine. If I decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you choose to contest it, I'll use all the evidence I have, and it won't end well for you. I didn't want to go down that road, but I will if necessary. She nodded, her face a mask of regret. I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it. I tried to defuse the situation, even though I knew it was useless. Do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a banana? She looked at me puzzled. No, what's the difference? You can't have a romantic relationship with a banana. She didn't find it amusing at all, her sadness deepening. It's time for you to leave, I said gently but firmly. I escorted her out of the house, her tears a silent protest. While she stood there heartbroken, I loaded all her belongings into her car. Once everything was packed, I opened the car door and handed her one last item, a wedding ring now flattened with a hammer. It's just scrap gold now. You can sell it for a decent price. After closing her car door, I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead. Goodbye, my love. I turned and walked back to the now empty house, not even watching her drive away. My own tears blurred my vision, and I cried for another hour until I was emotionally drained. Now, I had to weigh my options. I saw three paths before me. The first was to numb my pain with alcohol, drinking myself into oblivion. But I seldom drink and detest the aftermath of heavy drinking, so this wasn't a viable choice. The second was to end my life, which might bring a sense of closure, but I refused to give her that satisfaction. The third was to hold my head high, knowing I had done nothing wrong, and move forward with my life. The one bright spot was Kimberly's absence, which brought a faint, bittersweet smile to my face. I look forward to your comments on this story.